Aviation in itself is not inherently dangerous, but to an even greater degree than the sea, it is terribly unforgiving of any carelessness, incapacity, or neglect. This episode is the fourth in our Military Aircraft Crashes Explained series. In case you missed it, the first three were aircraft carrier crash lowlights, more aircraft carrier crash lowlights, and classic aircraft carrier crashes. Now this episode deals with crashes at military airfields, and unlike the previous three episodes, you'll also see footage of U.S. Air Force airplanes. Like the previous three episodes, this is presented with the idea that in order to appreciate how hard it is to do military aviation right, you need to see what happens when it goes wrong. I curated much of this footage when I was stationed at the Naval Safety Center as the editor of Approach magazine in the early 90s. A lot of it has never been publicly available before now. So here we go. This is an F-8 Crusader high rate of descent testing into an arrested landing. Bounces back into the air after landing too hard, catches the wire, and the flight doesn't last very long after that. F4 Phantom, low altitude, high speed run, what we call high Q, pitch oscillations, aircraft disintegrates. The engines keep going. F-18 doing drop tank jettison testing, hits the chase plane, a TA-4, takes out the A-4's wing, bursts into flames, the crew eventually ejects. Marine F-18 at an air show at El Toro, enters a split S too low, winds up hitting the ground. Here's a split screen of the F-18 and the HUD view. The pilot in this mishap was the Air Wing commander who was not qualified to fly this air show, and the guy who was supposed to fly it was standing watching and said to the guy next to him, "Watch this, he always screws this up." The pilot wound up with relatively minor injuries. He shattered both ankles and damaged his face when it hit the stick when he impacted the ground. He was lucky to survive. This is an early F-16 taxi test, and the airplane winds up getting airborne inadvertently, and so the test pilot decides to just take it flying. Tomcat plugging a tanker, take up reel malfunction, sine wave goes up to the tanker, comes back, snaps off the basket, and the F-14 now has it on its refueling probe. A6 practice air show at Whidbey Island. Departs the airplane, hits the ground. This is a midair between a TF-16 and an F-15 during a backseat demo ride for the NASCAR driver Bill Elliott. F-15 pilot ejected, F-16 landed safely. Blue Angel A4 crashes during an arrival show at Miramar. This is Blue Angel's F-11 that crashes during the Toronto Air Show. A7 diverts from the aircraft carrier to Diego Garcia after the left main landing gear won't come down. T-39 has a ground loop after the left main gear brake locks up. T-38 lands gear up. And you can see as the airplane comes to a halt, the crew egresses the front cockpit much quicker than the guy in the rear cockpit. Brand new F4J has runaway nose-up trim at launch out of the factory at St. Louis. Crew ejects. So U-2 landing in crosswinds, loses control and leaves the runway with the chase car in trail. This is a C-130 that has a hard landing on a snowy runway and breaks the right wing. X-15 drops off the B-52. This test pilot's name is Jack McKay. X-15 program was the precursor to the NASA space program. He loses the engine and has to do an emergency landing at one of the dry lake beds at Edwards Air Force Base. There's slow-mo of that landing with a rearward-looking camera. During an exercise with ground forces, F4 has a flare hang up in the bucket, causes a tail fire, and crew ejects. Canadian F-18 pilot doing an air show loses control during the high alpha pass, ejects just in time. This F-104 can't stop, hits the long field arresting gear with the nose gear, leaves the runway and flips over. T-33 that lost its nose wheel somehow. He lands safely, escorted by another T-33. So this is an F-4 Phantom spin testing at Edwards. Can't recover. He tries to deploy his drag chute. It just rips off. Here's the inside the cockpit view. Eventually the crew ejects, and the airplane crashes into the desert. This RA-5 Vigilante crashes on takeoff after hydraulic and electrical systems failure causes loss of control. The crew ejects out of the envelope. KC-135 lands with the nose gear up, rolls out with a lot of fire under the fuselage. The crew egresses as the crash crew rolls. An F-100 landing at Edwards Air Force Base gets into what's called a saber dance, caused by the swept wing stalling. The pilot tries to recover, but he crashes. Marine Corps Aviate-A Harrier crashes during a vertical flight demo at an air show. This is an F-102 without the nose gear down, leaves the runway. Hits the long-field gear machinery and bursts into flames. Here's a U-2 landing gear up. And as a precaution, the crash crew douses the airplane with water as the pilot opens the canopy to egress. This is the XB-70, precursor to the B-1. This program was plagued by problems and eventually was canceled after a midair during a promotional photo shoot. Here the brakes are locked up as it touches down, which causes massive wheel fires. You can also see the left nose tire is shredded. So Hornet with an unsafe left main gear makes an arrested landing and swerves off the runway. The pilot ejects onto the infield. In cellular view, his HUD footage captures his landing, kind of the final insult. This is the second ever Tomcat flight. Airplane has a total hydraulic failure. Crew ejects at the last second as the pilot loses control completely. F-16 prototype lands gear up on the infield. And you can see the pilot egresses as the crash crew surrounds him at the very end. This F-100 leaves the runway, winds up hitting a small shack. This is a B-52 that was on loan to Boeing from the Air Force. Lost its tail during a low-altitude flight test after encountering wind shear at altitude. Eventually lands safely with an F-100 on the wing. T-33 landing gear up. Here's a HUD view during a low level. The airplane hits the trees along a ridge line. It's F-111 spin testing at Edwards. There you can see the airplane oscillating during the spin, deploys the drag chute. Drag chute deployment does not stop the spin. Airplane still isn't recovered. See here, freeze frame. It's the crew ejecting. They're successful. It's an AV-8B. Harrier has a hard landing. Breaks off the nose cone, skidding across the infield. The fire starts to approach the canopy, so the pilot ejects. Gets a good shoot. Thunderbird F-16 mismanaged the maneuver after not accounting for mean sea level altitude at the airshow site, ejects at the last second. And here's a amazing picture of the moment he left the airplane. Finally, it's an A-10 pilot who ejects after secondary gun gas causes a dual-engine compressor stall during testing. The chase airplane took this amazing footage. Here's the airplane without a pilot and without any engine power, gliding until it hits the desert. This episode is dedicated to the memory of those who gave their lives in pursuit of military aviation capability. As always, if you're a first-time viewer, please ring the bell, become a subscriber so you don't miss anything. Like and comment, and if you'd like to help support this channel, please consider using the super thanks function in the comments section below, or become a patron at patreon.com/wardcarroll. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.